Good afternoon. I'm Carlos Fernandez, Policy Analyst at the Vegas Chamber. I'd like to thank you all for tuning into our Accessing Emergency Capital webinar with Nevada Community Banks, the Small Business Administration, and the Vegas Chamber President and CEO, Beth Sewald. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to explain some features of this call. In order to preserve high sound quality, we'll be muting everyone on the call besides our presenters to make it easier for everyone to hear. If you'd like to ask a question, there are a few ways you can do so. If you're joining this call on the web or through the mobile app, you can ask a question by using the chat feature on the interface. We'll ask a question on your behalf. You can also ask a question by clicking the hand raise button on the interface. We will call your name and unmute your line so that you can ask your question. Once you have asked your question, we'll remute your line so everyone on the call can hear the answer. And to preserve time, we ask that you please keep questions brief, and we'll be taking all questions at the end of the call. And now please welcome the Vegas Chamber's President and CEO, Beth Sewald.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you everybody for joining us on today's teleconference. We really appreciate that you're here today, and we've been getting a lot of feedback, so we wanted to make sure to have the guests on today that we have. From the SBA, we have Joe Amato, who is a little technically challenged today, but that's okay, Joe. We appreciate you're on by audio, and hopefully you can join us by video soon. We also have Ryan Sullivan with Bank of George and John Miller with Lexicon Bank. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Right. Just really quickly, I want to make a quick announcement. Please feel free to join us tomorrow, May 5th at 1 o'clock for a webinar with the Southern Nevada Health District. We'll have Las Vegas Councilman Brian Knudsen, Councilwoman Olivia Diaz, and then department managers from the Southern Nevada Health District as well. So you're not going to want to miss that one tomorrow. All right, thank you guys again for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about some of the offerings that you have at each of your respective banks. Ryan, let's start with you today.
Yeah, sure. Bank of George has been on the market since 2007. We are a locally owned community bank. Our focus really is small business, so that's kept us busy certainly over the last several weeks, like many other banks. But we typically have clients between 2 and 50 million in annual sales or revenue. We do commercial real estate loans, commercial and industrial loans, equipment financing, online banking, all the depository services. So from a profile standpoint, I think us and Lexicon are somewhat similar. We've been really positioned over the last 7 weeks to help as many people as we can, and we've got a book of business between the loan and deposit side of about 4,000 individual accounts. And I think that over the last 7 weeks, we've been in contact with every single one of them. So our teams have been extremely busy, working with all of our clients, which is, like I said, the lion's share of which is right in that small business window. So there's been a number of ways that we've been able to support them through these times, not only PPP, but a number of other business relief and modification programs, and just helping them with the tools to help navigate, through the uncertainty of the times and have them positioned to win when the economy starts to open back up again.
Great, thank you, Ryan. And John at Lexicon, give us a similar update regarding your organization.
Yeah, we're definitely newer to the market. We opened our doors in August of 19, so it hasn't even been 10 months, which is mind-boggling. But one of the things we recognized in looking at Las Vegas and Nevada as a whole is, from 2008, we saw 13 institutions statewide kind of exit banking in Las Vegas. And so we thought that the business community was significantly underbanked, which was why we started Lexicon. And as Ryan mentioned, our focuses are similar both in customer and size, but it really is, relationship banking, which is, I think, most of the pain that we've seen in this program is not really having that relationship and knowledge with who your banker is and what they can do and how fast they can move, knowing who you are. So, like Ryan, we're focused on businesses and executing on their unique needs in the banking community, both from commercial real estate to, lines of credit. And so we've seen amazing growth over this time period. We, like Ryan, have touched all of our current clients and started dealing with many new relationships through this process of offering PPP loans. We look forward to, fostering those relationships as we move forward.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both again for being here. Joe Amato, I know we can hear you, but we can't see you. Can you share what the latest funding from Congress means and has meant for the payroll protection program and give us an update on all that, please?
Well, thank both Ryan Sullivan from Bank of George and John Miller from Lexicon. They are two of the leading banks in our community that have really been doing all they can to help small business, and I want to thank them greatly. I love their logos in back of their heads, where all you see now is my big voice, and then see nothing but black, which is where my mind is right now. To say the least, probably talk to John about 10 times a day. And Ryan, I think I send you a couple of emails every couple of days with updates, including today's update, which is phenomenal. Where are we right now? As of this weekend, we funded $175 billion in PPP funding of the 310 to 320 that have been earmarked. We have about 145 to 150 billion left to go, which is phenomenal because from what we can tell, all the backlog has now been filled. So basically everything we have coming in now has been, is basically new deals or new people finding out PPP. We're going to be reaching out to several groups that really haven't taken advantage of the PPP, like the nonprofit and the for-profit hospitals. And we're going to be doing a lot more outreach. And to the gentlemen you're seeing right here, both Ryan and John, we're going to want to get a good understanding of where they're at with taking in new applications, because we're going to be actually going out and proactively finding new applications for businesses, nonprofits throughout the state. And hopefully they have the bandwidth to take on some new applications as well. This morning, we received sort of a very interesting new interim rule about the businesses that are having a very hard time getting employees back from unemployment. And this is going to be sort of groundbreaking, because every lender has asked me this question: what do I do with the businesses where half of their people are on unemployment making $1,000 a week and don't really believe they should come back until employment's exhausted? What the rule basically says, and I'm basically going to give you my description of it as opposed to read it verbatim, is that if an employer is having a difficult time getting all their employees back, which is a requirement for PPP forgiveness. Now, this is all having to do with forgiveness. If they do not or cannot get all their employees back, but they make a written attempt or documented attempt to secure those employees, and those employees, or former employees, I guess you could say, and those former employees respond in writing or in a documented way saying that they cannot come back because they're basically collecting unemployment at a higher rate than they would be getting paid, then, and the banks are going to shake their head, then we're going to equate that into the process of forgiveness. So I am instructing all the businesses that I've talked to, and believe it or not, I've talked to about 200 businesses already today. And it's only what, 112? I've already talked to several, over almost 200 businesses already today in a webinar and in another email trend I just got off of, where basically I'm telling them, send them emails, send them WeChat, send them whatever you can in writing, asking them to come back, and then basically take a picture or print out their response, because you're going to need to give that to everyone that does not respond. You're going to need to give that to lenders, proof that you have documented their resistance in coming back, and that it won't affect their forgiveness, their amount of forgiveness. So example, 20 employees, 10 of them come back, 10 of them don't because they're collecting unemployment. Have your payroll that shows those 10 employees, have the documentation to show the 10 that won't come back, and you should be eligible for 100% forgiveness at that point. But I've asked the question to Washington and I've gotten an answer yet. But if you cannot, if you're not basically still spending 75% of your PPP funding on payroll because you can't bring all those employees back, does that affect forgiveness? So I can see John Miller's brain working right now. That is a question I haven't gotten answered yet, but it was a question I posed this morning in a conference call and everybody sort of scratched their heads. So I think that's the two-part equation to getting forgiveness is Number one, you have to apply 75% of your PPP funding toward payroll. Number two, you have to match the number of employees you had on your application. If they're giving you forgiveness on not matching the employees, are they also giving you the forgiveness on not using the funds at 75%? So Mary Beth, I'll have that answer soon, and I will get it out to everyone so they can spread it out as well.
Those are
yeah.
pretty critical. Those are pretty critical questions to be answered for those businesses really trying to plan on how they use that portion of the money that doesn't have to be used on payroll. So if that's reducing the amount that they can ultimately be forgiven, it really kind of changes their internal calculation of how they're running.
Well, this is my answer to that, and this is the recommendation I made upstream. That money, which may not be used for payroll at that point in time, will still need to be set aside for payroll. So they still either have to have spent or set aside an amount equal to that 75% for payroll. If those employees don't come back until, again, and the best part about this is we got about 6 to 8 weeks to get this question answered per se, because that's when forgiveness is going to start to be determined, or maybe 5 to 7 weeks at this point. So yeah, that is something that's going to be very important, and I will get that answer for sooner than later. I've already exhausted the patience of most of the people in DC, because that was the first thing I said, and they're like, oh, well, we didn't think of that. I said, well, it is part of a two-part equation for forgiveness, and I know Ryan's not going to forgive a loan unless he knows specifically how he's supposed to forgive it, and I so know that you, John, aren't going to do it either, and every other bank that I talk to on a regular basis. So so that's going to be an important equation, and probably it'll be 1,000 questions about it as well. So the two most important things about PPP right now are there's still money left. We're going to be looking for ways to get it out there because we think we've exhausted all the backlog from the first tier. What it says is that we've given $349 billion in EIDL 1, and we've given $175 billion in EIDL 2. And believe it or not, for the state of Nevada, we gave $2 billion away in EIDL 1, and we gave $1.9 billion away already for EIDL 2. And the majority of loans, believe it or not, for PPP, nobody had corrected me. The amazing thing is PPP 1 was $209,000 average. PPP 2 is $79,000 average. So you're seeing that we're actually helping more small businesses, a lot of independent contractors, a lot of sole proprietors. And they have caps of $20,832 for most sole proprietors and independent contractors, but that $20,832 goes a long way for a lot of these people. The other thing I want to share that's going to be important, EIDL reopened today, but before you rush to your computers to reapply or to apply, EIDL opened up today to take applications for agribusinesses only. So agricultural-based businesses, EIDL is taking applications for right now. It is also taking reapplication for anyone that applied for EIDL in the first 10 days before it's streamlined and has a number 2 confirmation number. So if you have a number 2 confirmation number, you go back on the EIDL website and you basically reapply. It's going to say you're an agribusiness, but they've figured out something internally that if you have a number 2 number, they're going to basically be able to source you out and basically give you the new application number with a 3. And it might even be a 4. I think it's a 3 or a 4. If you're an agribusiness, you're automatically entry. If you're anybody else, you can go onto the website and try, and you're going to get either kicked out or you're going to be basically disallowed from reapplying or applying if you're not an agribusiness. So if you're an agribusiness or a business that basically starts with a number 2 confirmation number, the EIDL website, sba.gov/disaster economic injury disaster loan program is open to you. Both the EIDL and the EIDL Advance is open to you.
So Joe, there's been obviously a lot of calls at the bank today coming in from some miscommunications about multiple banks being able to pull PPP.
Yes.
Is there?
Well, the headache started about 6 o'clock this morning when we found out that some banks that originally took an application, I'm not going to say there were bigger banks, I'm not going to say there weren't bigger banks, but did not act on those applications in a timely manner and went to great banks like Bank of George and and Meadows and Lexicon and so on, and Nevada State Bank and so on and so forth, they basically were supposed to be, when Lexicon or Bank of George went in and actually made an application for those borrowers, for those applicants, and received an E-Tran number, they were supposed to be locked out of the E-Tran process, so no other bank could come in and duplicate the application. Well, it appears that over the weekend, some other banks not only got E-Tran application, or we don't know if they got E-Tran numbers, but started funding applications. And we had several people, including a lovely young lady that was funded by Lexicon Bank, that received money from a bank beginning with C, which will not say who they are, and Lexicon equally, and they were frantic. They were going to jail for fraud. So let me tell the people that are out there, if you received a funding from your initial lender and subsequently went to a second lender and got approved and funded, maybe a smaller bank, community bank, regional bank, obviously focus on the bank that actually funded your deal first and try to, as best you can, isolate the money if you did receive money from one of these other bigger banks, because we're trying to figure out a mechanism that it has to be returned. You obviously can't keep money from both banks because that would not be proper. And you can't take more than one PPP application from more than one bank. So that would not be proper. So at this point, we're dealing with it. We're trying to find out how to solve it. But if it does happen, where you basically receive money from two banks, you know, your smaller bank, your regional bank, your community bank, and then all of a sudden out of the blue found money in your bank from a B or a W or a C bank, you will contact me at joseph.amato@sba.gov, and we're sending all of that information forward to DC so that they can start tabulating. We think it might have happened in the thousands. So don't be surprised if it happened to you. Don't be afraid if it happened to you. You disclose it to me, you're protected. Isolate that money because it's got to be returned. Unless they pay you,
well, let us know.
John?
Let us know what's going on. We'll also communicate with the SBA as well. So
yeah, if you let your originating bank that actually approved you, and then all of a sudden this money shows up, let them know and let me know. But do not hesitate to let me know. I get 600 emails a day. What's wrong with 700? So it'll be joseph.amato, AMATO, SBA.gov. Aren't you glad you can't see my face?
I know what it looks like.
And Joe, just to clarify too, this chamber member didn't know that they received the first loan, and so they panicked, right? When they found out that they got that, because everybody's so busy, there was a big lag in communication. So they went ahead, because they felt like they hadn't heard from their first bank, they went to the other bank. And anyway, that's how the whole snafu happened, correct?
Yeah, well, in some cases, what happened is they went to the other bank because they hadn't heard from the first bank in quite a while, weeks. They got approved and funded by the second bank. At that point in time, the way the E-Tran system should work is no other bank should be able to fund anything, shouldn't get a number, shouldn't be able to get anything. They're locked out for some reason. And just, I think it's pure volume. You remember the first tranche of SBA funding for PPP, we did in 14 days the same amount of funding the SBA has done in total in 14 years. So just the sheer volume of what is hit, the SBA, which was the smallest cabinet agency and the least, the biggest kept secret in the US government, well, we're now in the forefront, and obviously we're dealing with process issues that we're trying to deal with very efficiently, but again, just sheer volume has overwhelmed the system, I think, in some cases. But yeah, again, if you find that you've applied at the second bank, got approved and funded, and then the first bank, all of a sudden you look at your bank account and there's money in it that they didn't even notify that's coming, which has been the case, you need to isolate that money. You need to inform me and the second bank as well that this has happened, and we will do everything we can to make sure, just disclosing it all. Remember, people were crying, I'm going to get accused of fraud. Fraud has to have a malicious intent. There is no malicious intent by anybody that this accidentally happens to, and we'll figure out a way to fix it so nobody gets in any trouble.
Well, Joe, thank you for personally reaching out to that chamber member and helping, because I know they were pretty upset. But let's go ahead and get to some questions right now. This one says, I'm an office manager for a small private school that has only 10 staff. I received the PPP yesterday, but had applied with 10 staff. In the summer, I may only have 7. How will this affect the amount I was given for the PPP?
Do you want me to answer, or do you guys want to answer it?
No, take it, Joe.
Well, because
You've answered this question a lot lately, I know.
if you have a seasonal type business like this, lenders, and both my lenders I'm looking at, I'm so happy I can look at you and you don't have to see me. Lenders are asking me this question every day now, because now we're going from process and funding to forgiveness and closing. There are going to be some guidelines put out. We're involved in actually hopefully getting the right guidelines out there. If a business is seasonal like that, the SBA came up with an interim rule that talked about seasonal businesses, and that there will be still forgiveness if there's a seasonal equation. I've looked John Miller in the eye. I haven't seen Ryan face to face in quite a while, but I looked John Miller in the eye and said, listen, we will figure this out before this next 5 or 7 weeks. Our focus really is trying to figure out, because again, this is all put together with bubble gum, Band-Aids, and masking tape. So we're going to try to figure out the forgiveness portion in the same way, but hopefully with a little more clarity. At the end of the day,
you would agree the concept behind that forgiveness piece isn't going to change, right? It's going to be the concept that you try to keep your employees employed. It's paycheck protection. And so long as the employer approaches it with that in regard, we have to hope that the SBA, steps up to the plate as well, right? With that being, that's the principal point of the program.
I agree with you 1000%, and that is the focus that we have. If the business, listen, you guys are smart guys, most of the time. If the owner makes every attempt, and basically what I tell owners to do, if you're running into difficulty, document it. Give the bank the understanding that we did everything we could. We try to replace people. I'd rather that this new rule is great, because it is definitely helping us with the unemployment issue. But again, remember when I was on a conference call this weekend with the senator, I think on Friday, we were talking about nobody, when they put the unemployment insurance bonus, that $600 extra a week, thought the PPP program even existed. So there was sort of like there was definitely some conflict from day one on how the two were set up, and how they actually hurt each other in a sense by bolstering unemployment on one end and then basically trying to get your employees back on the other end, PPP. So I think let's use the word reasonable. There's a reasonable expectation that we're going to basically work with, and I will sit 24/7 by the phone to work with every lender. And if I have to give a sort of either a clarification or edification or some solace to each individual bank that has these issues, I'm going to do it and put it in writing. And I've told Washington I'm going to do that. I mean, the focus really is, or told my boss who told Washington, the focus really is the business is supposed to make its best and most reasonable attempt to get all the employees back. And if there are some mitigating factors like seasonality, yes, there's businesses actually that I talked to recently, Ryan, that they don't bring all their employees back until June, because they're a summer business that really works with a late summer business for all intents and purposes. So they said, we want the PPP, we want to use it for payroll, we wanted to, take advantage of this, but we're trying to get our employees back early and it's not working because they have other obligations. I told them, document the heck out of everything what you're doing and making the best attempt. You guys are reasonable guys. You guys obviously want these things 100% forgiven as much as the businesses do. We'll find an answer.
And I would say we've been working with a lot of our applicants through the process, in as much as we know what forgiveness is going to look like to really set them up. And I think we're probably all telling everybody the same thing, just document, document, document. In some cases, some organizations are deciding to open up separate accounts, track everything separately. We're facilitating that. Obviously the goal of the banks and certainly the applicants is to make sure that their business is in a position to have as much of the funds forgiven as possible. So, that can be a challenge, as Joe alluded to. The scope of this program, at Bank of Georgia, we're a significant 7A lender. We're top 100 in the nation. So we know the 7A program. I'm not sure if that helped or hurt us because the PPP program is so different. Every time that new guidance comes out, we're reading those IFRs, we're reading the FAQs just like you are. And we're really, obviously looking forward to the guidance on the forgiveness because that's a critical component.
Ryan, agree. John, you have anything to say?
No,
Okay.
he said it perfect.
All right, just equal time for everybody.
So another question that just came through is something that happened to the person, Joe, something like what happened to the person that you were talking about earlier. This person said that they applied for the PPP on day one. This person banks with another bank, not Bank of Georgia, Lexicon. They said they have not heard anything and they won't return calls. What can this person do in this case? Any suggestions?
Well, the sad thing, I'll tell you two truths about this program. The sad thing is lenders try to make it, certain types of lenders try to make it seamless, effortless on their part and make it as automated as possible. And it seems like nobody is at the store except for a machine taking their information. And that's sad. The community banks, the regional banks have been very proactive. I mean, I'm talking to them every day. They're talking to people every day. And there's a lot more communication proactivity. The situation that is caused today is mostly because of the inactivity by some lenders not to be responsive. What we're trying to do is, and I want to sort of inform people of something that's very, very important, and I hope both lenders agree with me here. In most cases, the SBA is not involved in this process whatsoever, except to give guidance, okay? And that sometimes is beneficial and sometimes it's not. But from the day of application on the PPP program to the day that they submit the application for what we call an E-Tran number, the SBA doesn't even know that application exists. So every bank, some banks that begin with a B or a W or a C, that basically say, we're waiting on the SBA, we're waiting on this, we're waiting on that, we're waiting on. The bottom line is the SBA does not know your application exists until it's put into the E-Tran system and it's given a number. And at that point, the bank has 10 days to fund that application. It's supposed to have 5 days to take the application and process it. That went out the window. And then for some banks, not all, not the two I'm looking at here, most likely. And then basically from the day they approve it to the day they fund it should be 10 days. The SBA is not involved in the process whatsoever, except to issue a number and provide guidance and call me 600 times a day. So that's the reality of things. So when a client calls and says, listen, the bank is telling me the SBA is holding up the process, there's only one way there's holding up the process. It's because technology is holding up the process, not the SBA. So that's one myth I want to satisfy. And I tell you, both banks sitting here can pretty much confirm exactly what I said, correct?
And Joe, I mean, there were many applications Lexicon tried to pull, and we ultimately found out another bank had already received a number, and we were the first ones to tell the applicant that their loan had been secured by another bank. The other bank hadn't even contacted them. And so that communication process definitely broke down. We were just happy to be able to let them know and kind of let them be at ease the fact that a number had been secured. So I think communication is critical. It's one of the things I'm sure Ryan has worked on hard. We've talked to every borrower multiple times, many borrowers that we didn't even get a loan for, just to let them know what the process should look like, whether it be here or somewhere else.
Yeah, I would say that communication's been key. We were talking a little bit about that before we started in terms of reaching out to all of our clients. We certainly, we understand, and I think there has been some misconception, thanks for clearing it up, Joe, of like when those funds are actually secured. And obviously it's when they get an 8-digit E-Tran SBA authorization number. So in some cases, we had some clients that submitted PPP through Brand X Bank. In some cases on April 3rd and hadn't heard anything. And we gave the general advice, not to get ourselves in trouble, is you can only accept one of these loans, but that doesn't mean that you can't apply at multiple locations and let us know if we can help. So it's been a communication issue, and system issues, notwithstanding that Joe described. By and large, once we get that authorization number, then you have the 10 days to document and fund these loans, which has been an interesting logistical challenge. In fairness to banks of all size, I don't think the systems generally were created to withstand the type of volume that we've seen through this program. Like Joe indicated, we've done, the SBA has done 14 years worth of loans essentially in 4 weeks. And just imagine if everyone in your Rolodex or anybody that you've known for the last 20 years all reached out to you at the same time and asked for a PPP loan. That's kind of what it's been like in the banking industry, and maybe in a small sense, but at Lexicon and Bank of George. But it's been a huge backlog. The good news is with the second round, I'd agree with you, Joe. I think most of that backlog has been worked through. And also to kind of tie into your statistics, what we saw at the beginning is within the small business space, those larger organizations that are still eligible, they were ready to go. Now we're seeing a lot of the smaller organizations, 10 or fewer employees, both for-profit and nonprofit, they're getting their PPP funds now. So we've seen those average dollar amounts per loan go down quite a bit round 2 compared to round 1, which is great.
Okay, I'm getting a lot of questions at the chamber about the reasons for employees not coming back and how that affects the forgiveness. So this particular company has folks who are actually leaving their employment because they're moving out of town. So they say they're moving to another state. Can that fall under the same forgiveness?
Who's moving out of state, the business or the employees?
The
Employee.
Again, it's the number of employees you put on your application are based on the average number of employees that you had in the observance period, whatever that is, whether you're seasonal, whether it's for the whole year of 2019. It is your obligation as a business owner to match that number to get full forgiveness. Now, the unemployment insurance exemption obviously is going to be helpful. If you have people that moved out of town, you got to replace them with other people. I mean, in order to meet that requirement, that application target number that you had previously. That is, that's a business owner is going to have to replace them anyway. Trying to replace them as soon as possible is going to be important in order to get that 100% forgiveness.
Another question, Joe, we get a lot is, do I have to use it by June 30th? How hard and fast is that rule going to be? As businesses have seen a lot of guidance changes, many are trying to figure out how long these funds can last then as they try to, slowly ramp their business back into actual, performance as a business.
Well, I asked that question. The June 30th deadline is the cancellation of the program, and their hope was to have everything cleaned up by June 30th or thereabouts sometime soon after. My understanding is at this point, if for whatever reason they have not exhausted all their funding by the 8-week period for whatever reason, and it may have to do with this new unemployment insurance clause, I don't know. The initial response was they can have that money. They can still use that money, but it's going to be reverted into that 1% loan and paid over 2 years. That was the initial reaction. I'm not going to say that that's gospel yet because I haven't seen it. It's been alluded to in the CFR. It's been alluded to in the Q&A from Treasury, but I haven't seen hard and fast rule based now on this UI change, this unemployment insurance change. So again, it's one of those nebulous things that we have to figure out in the next. My hope is to have it figured out by this week. And I know that, I've got plenty of memos out there already since this morning trying to get clarification. So I see what you're saying. But right now, the way the rule reads is if they had $100,000 and they only used 50 and they used 50 for payroll, they used 25 for other eligible PPP expenses, and they got 25 still sitting there. Hypothetically, the way the rule is now, they can still use that money for payroll after June 30th or after the 8-week process, but it would become a loan payable in 2 years at a 1% interest rate. I have a feeling that might change. I don't know that specifically right now, but we'll have to see.
We'll all wait for more guidance.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I will provide it as I try to. Yes, Ryan?
Some of the questions that we're getting, Joe, on the updated FAQ that came out that really was in response to some of these publicly traded companies taking PPP, and then also with the the fact that every PPP loan over 2 million is going to be audited. Some of the questions that we're getting from larger potential PPP applicants is how far, we know that the credit elsewhere test has been eliminated or modified, but how far do we expect the SBA and the Treasury to apply this other outside liquidity standard? So, one of the questions that we had was, okay, well, I've got, someone who's a principal of a business, they've got, let's say X dollars in a retirement account. Are they going to come back and say, well, you should have cashed this in, and so you had other sources of liquidity that you could have used, so really you didn't need PPP financing?
Well, I think reasonableness has to be the part of the equation here, and also public relations. I mean, I think the CFR and the FAQs only go to so far, and a bank making a determination of whether or not there's a reasonable expectations of government-backed funding, especially forgiven funding, should be used. I can't say specifically. I've talked to some banks about some individual applications that had some of those pieces involved, and what I did is I just ran it through my boss and some other people that I said, listen, this is what they're trying to do. This is how it's being done. Are we okay with that? And they gave me the thumbs up or thumbs down, and I told the bank at that point. And as John knows, on an individual basis, I do look into applications. In fact, I'm dealing with one with your bank right now on somebody, whether or not it's a passive concern or what type of business operation is right now. And I will, on a case-by-case basis, John will tell you, I will help the bank at least give them cover or help make a determination of whether or not it's worth the risk or whether it's worth the public relations issue on some of those issues. As far as liquidity tests, completely dropped right now, so that's not an issue. And credit elsewhere is completely dropped right now when it comes to PPP. So for those two things, now publicly traded companies, that has a whole different equation that still comes into play, and ownership and splits and stuff like that come into play. But Ryan, I'll tell you and any other banker listening on this call, I'll take those types of things on a case-by-case basis and get you an answer and provide cover. I mean, if that's something you need.
I appreciate that. It's been helpful on several deals that we had to deal with. So thank you, Joe, for that.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. You and your team locally in the local SBA office has just been, those 600 emails we're getting a day, you're really responsive. We really appreciate your support.
That's all right. I'll give you your $20 later. Go ahead, Mary Beth.
So I'll raise you 20. I would echo that, because Joe's been very helpful for our chamber members as well. So Joe, thank you.
Well, I wanted to be anonymous the rest of my tenure here at the SBA. I guess I blew that. So
I would say so. So would you, I'm getting a lot of questions. Would you provide some clarity around the latest funding from Congress, what that has meant for the PPP? Can business owners still apply for these funds? And do you anticipate more funding later this summer? I know there's phase 4 and different things like that. So folks need some clarity around what's to come and what their opportunities still might be.
Well, as the SBA has done with the second round of funding for PPP, which is in the area 310, 320, John and I were talking about this last week. We've absorbed the backlog, and we're basically now working with everyone down to independent contractors, that basically have 1099s, $100,000 or less, and getting $20,832. Now, those aren't fancy or luxurious PPP loans by any standard, but the banks are doing them, and we have several banks that are basically stepping up with those. And that's why the PPP average has dropped to $79,000, because most of them are smaller PPP loans, and people can get as little as $10,000. So there's the way it was set up. Basically, one of the first set asides was for small banks, which they absorbed in the first 4 hours of PPP funding. And then there were set asides for rural, which we're still working on. We have an enormous amount of $60 billion set aside for rural businesses, which we're reaching out to. And also now hospitals, which we're now reaching out to, because not enough of them have applied. I knew that through the week when we were hitting numbers, if we hadn't absorbed almost 3/4 of the PPP by like the third day, I was pretty sure that we're going to have PPP funding available for at least the next week to 10 days. And that would run 17 days or longer. I still think with the average size of the PPP loans that we're still going to have enough money. Every business that's a for-profit or non-profit business is still eligible. Independent contractor, still eligible. Sole proprietor, still eligible. So, we're, like I said, we're now actually focused in our office, and we're hoping the bank's focus as well is on outreach. Did you get your PPP loan? You're eligible for it. It's very easy. It's an easy process. I mean, really is from a standpoint of most of the banks, the documentation is pretty easy. It's stuff you have readily available. And, it's looking for ways to get it done. So anybody who has questions about it, obviously call the banks directly, call my office, call me, email me, and I'll help you through it.
Joe, you
I would just say that the funding, the timing is really important. Yeah.
The timing's important?
Well, I would just say, in terms of the 175 billion that was authorized through May 1st, and there's still a big push for a lot of new applicants. So I would just encourage everyone to reach out to their banker on a very proactive way, because we don't know how long those funds are going to last, unless you have some insight into that, Joe.
Well, my crystal ball tells me we're at least good for another week, at least. And, as the averages continue to drop, I still think that could last a little longer. But yes, timing's important. Don't sit on this. Those who haven't applied yet, all is not lost. Every rumor that I hear, I want to kick somebody in the butt. Every time I hear a rumor, we're running out of funds. And we were hearing that the second and third day. And I was calling John Miller. I said, you wouldn't believe where we're at. And he said, you're kidding. So, there's more than enough money left. There's more. We could fund another 1 million businesses at this point, I think, at this point. So
that was either early or late at night, Joe, one of the two.
Ryan,
Joe,
don't you
Amato,
start calling me all the time too.
This morning.
Okay, Beth. Sorry.
I just said I want to know what you had for breakfast this morning.
I didn't eat breakfast yet.
Okay, that could be it. So let me ask another question from our folks on the line. I have an EIDL confirmation number but cannot find it. I've gotten this a couple of times, is why I'm asking it. Is there a way to find the EIDL number on the SBA website? They can't find their EIDL number.
That is a huge problem. If they didn't save it or take a snapshot of the screen when they basically got their EIDL application submitted. Sadly, EIDL is run by a group called ODA, Office of Disaster Assistance. ODA is like the non-kissing cousin of the SBA. Even though we're part of SBA, we have no interaction with them at all. We're trying to figure out a bridge, and in 4 weeks we still haven't been able to build one step toward that bridge. We don't know. We have no access to the system. We can't check on names. We can't check on tax ID numbers. I have 3 or 4 businesses that are just in tears because they haven't gotten EIDL money. They don't remember their confirmation number. They don't know if it's a 2 or a 3. And there's nothing we can do to help. Now we're hoping to come out with some guidance, some direct phone numbers, and some email addresses that we're going to tell people to start inundating ODA directly, because we can't get the information from them. So we're going to ask ODA to respond to at least I get 250 emails a day about EIDL status, and all I can do is try to get them some status update by one person that has been able to sort of search for us. But that's it. So we're going to try to figure out a better bridge, because right now it sort of sucks.
Okay.
Joe, we've been seeing a couple applications come in lately where they obviously have received an EIDL loan, and we have to reduce the PPP amount as a ratio to be able to get it approved. And so the notification hasn't even gone out to them. We're able to tell them they're obviously going to be receiving some funds, and we have to kind of figure out what that amount is.
I'm trying to get clarification on that, because again, if the way we read the rule, if the EIDL amount is not less than 25% of the total PPP funding, so say you've got a $50,000 EIDL loan and a $100,000 PPP loan, My understanding from the CFR is you don't have to require paying off the idle loan with PPP fundings.
No, it's not that you have to pay it off, Joe. It's that it limits the amount of the total you're available. If you look at the application, it's a multiplication with the idle included.
Now, my thought process is the next time I'm in your place, which will probably be tomorrow, I want to see that in action.
I'll show you I can show you a couple when you're in.
Because you don't have, I mean, we were told you do not have to wrap idle into PPP. You don't even have to, and most people, some before this point, didn't even know if they had an idle loan yet. They only knew they had an application. So if somebody does have an idle loan, it basically tells you on your form that they have the idle loan. Is that what you're telling me?
For most businesses, it wouldn't be advisable to roll the idle into the PPP because of
Absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And I advise people not to if they have a choice. So I'll take a look at that tomorrow because I want that, if that is the way it is, I want to make sure it's fixed.
Great.
Okay, next one, Mary Beth.
Yep, okay. This is about timing again, and I know we kind of talk about this quite a bit, but I really feel like we need to clarify more because I'm getting some similar questions about timing and so forth. So I'm just going to read this question to you guys. Can I receive as much money from the PPP for an employee if I am not able to rehire them until the 7th or the 8th week of the loan? Can I get the full amount as if they were rehired the first week? We need to clarify that again.
The way it's supposed to work, remember, this is a reemployment program that the day after you get funding, you're supposed to have the same number of employees from day one, week one, for the entire 8-week period. Not the same people necessarily, but the same number of employees. So you may have somebody that can't come into the 7th week. Hypothetically, you should have, if you're supposed to have 10 employees, you should have 10 employees from the first week. That's the whole idea of paycheck replacement, is that it's supposed to be bringing people back to work and off unemployment if they're on unemployment. That's sort of a change, obviously, with today's rule, really. But again, with the timing of it, the way the rule reads, and it is very confusing, and there's a lot of groups that basically try to advise differently. You're supposed to have your employees matching the number of employees on your application day one, week one to day 7, week 8 in order to get 100%.
Okay, sorry guys, I think we have some feedback. I'm not sure if Ryan or John, if that's maybe your microphones, maybe when we're not talking, I'll go ahead and mute mine in case it's me.
It's somebody else.
Yeah, okay. Here's another question. I received my PPP on April 16th and hadn't heard from EIDL, but received $1,000 on April 24th. How do I account for this when documenting the PPP?
If you receive the EIDL advance, you don't actually have received EIDL funding yet. You've just received the advance. Basically, you can tell your bank you received advance, but you still haven't actually received an EIDL loan yet. So as far as the bank is concerned, there's no EIDL funding. You've just received the advance. And the advance could be a grant if the rest of the EIDL loan is disapproved or not funded. So for all intents and purposes, just receiving an advance, that $1,000 to $10,000 really is sort of nebulous as far as where it really pulls into the EIDL, into the PPP program.
Okay, excellent. We just have a couple minutes left. I'm gonna give this question to both Ryan and John. What is your target customer? Can anybody bank with you all, and are you still taking customers?
Yeah, I think our target customer, we're a business bank. That said, we accept deposits and relationships with any individual that lives in Las Vegas. Obviously, our focus is obviously designed for business customers. We are still trying to deal with individuals as they come in and request PPP loans. It's really our ability to be able to process and get the information in and move forward with that account. And so they can definitely reach out to us, and we'll try to deal with any of their needs.
Okay, Ryan?
Yeah, same here, small business bank. The SBA small business standards, that describes our entire portfolio. 2 to 50 million in revenue. Pretty much everybody has 500 employees or less. We're definitely trying to support as many small businesses and people as we can, because I think that's something that we haven't lost sight of, as this is really a program to help as many people as possible and keep as many employees on the payroll. So yeah, we're definitely accepting applications, kind of like Lexicon. We're definitely a relationship bank, so we don't do a lot of one-off transactions. Working with them and really providing comprehensive support and banking services that's our wheelhouse.
And Mary Beth, I will tell you, they're both great community banks. They fill certain niches. They like certain types of customers, but they like all small businesses. I mean, not like certain kind of customers. They like customers that like to put money in their bank, obviously. But they're great small businesses, very active. They're reaching out to me all the time for clarification of things. And Lexicon being the newest kid on the block, and Bank of George being a very established small community bank in this area, they do amazing things. And I would tell every small business that they'll be better served by dealing with either one of these banks.
Yeah, I think people have to. This is a great opportunity to see how community banks really work, but deposits that stay in this valley are ultimately redeployed to businesses within the valley. So as we grow those deposit bases from businesses in Las Vegas, we as a community and bank are reinvesting them in loans in our own community. And that's keeping that economic pump primed for Vegas's recovery is going to be critical. So I encourage every business to really reevaluate what their banking relationship looks like and look to your community institutions to really, you'll see a double-edged sword as it comes back again, adding value back into this valley. So
yeah, go ahead,
Go ahead.
Well, I just echo that. I mean, I think the strength that we have within this community, particularly highlighted over the last several weeks, is within the community banking sector. There's been a lot of larger institutions that, as on a pro rata basis, have not done anything close to the amount of PPP lending that Lexicon and Bank of George have done. In addition, we're still lending when it makes sense. Obviously, some businesses have been impacted, but we're still sitting here with a significant lending pipeline. And I think one of the things that's important as people think about what access to capital is going to look like in the months to come, PPP got the biggest amount of attention, rightly so, as a huge program. One of the components of the CARES Act was the SBA payment relief program, and that is just huge. And that was $17 billion that was authorized for existing 7A and 504 loans, where the SBA is paying, not a deferral, the SBA is paying principal and interest for 6 months. That is also going to be eligible for, that program is going to be available for new loans in those categories that are funded and approved within 6 months of the enactment of the act. So that's the SBA stepping up in more ways than just PPP.
In the last couple of minutes that we have, what are your policies on folks coming down to your branches, and what do you recommend on that front as far as contacting you?
Yeah, we've restricted. Go ahead, John.
We talked about this before. Our doors are locked. We're in the bank. You can call ahead and make an appointment, or if you show up, we try to greet you at the door, kind of talk through the door and find out what your needs are, and we'll let you into the bank to conduct banking business if you're a customer. But we're trying to protect our staff as well as any of our clients as they come in.
We're the same. We're about 88 employees, 70% are working from home, but the branches are still open. We're having people call ahead, and we're waiving all the charges for online banking setup and remote deposit capture. Most of our clients in small business are used to accessing the banking digitally, so that's been great.
All right, great. Well, thank you all for your time today. John Miller at Lexicon, Ryan Sullivan at Bank of George, and of course, Joe Amato from the Small Business Administration. We really appreciate all of you being with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. We really appreciate everything that the Chamber is doing for this region, and taking the lead on a lot of these types of forums. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Joe. We appreciate you, and we'll have you all on again very soon, I'm sure, because People need this information, so we're here to provide it, and we appreciate your help as well. And don't forget to join us tomorrow for the Southern Nevada Health District webinar at 1 o'clock. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.